Hi everyone, my name is Brad Smith. I'm going to walk through an application I built for Flatiron School's online web developer program, which I've just completed. And it is a Ruby on Rails application, which is a API-based Rails app. So it's just going to serve up data. Then I'm going to use JavaScript and React and Redux on the front end to navigate the data, view it, and essentially create a user experience. So that's the two halves of it. I'm going to go through several pieces of how it's done, and I'll start with just a quick tour of the application. We'll go and look through some code, and then hit some of the high points of what goes into this, and some challenges I faced, and I'll make some observations on how cool JavaScript and React are compared to just only Rails. All of these things have their place in the universe, though. It's great, and I'm looking forward to building more and more of these kinds of applications just to solve problems and just make the world a better place and make my life better and the people around me. So the one I've chosen here is a music studio application. So you have 4 basic groups of data, which is students and teachers, and then resources. So that would be like the music that they get assigned, their exercises and drills and whatnot. And then a lesson. And a lesson has a teacher, a lesson has a student, and may or may not have 1 or more or 0 resources assigned to it. So it's a basic, what we call a CRUD application: create, retrieve, update, delete multiple items. So the trick is keeping track of all these piano students and what other exercises they've been assigned, and then have the flexibility to quickly assign multiple resources to students and keep track of what you've given them over time, and not get bogged down in the details of writing notes and things. Instead, you're working on playing music together, and the application takes care of keeping track of all that stuff. The other thing cool about it is that you can take snippets out of YouTube videos or little pieces of music and notation that you found along the way, or make up exercises of your own and submit them to the resources library as a teacher. And then they can be used by anybody in the community there that wants to use that resource for their students. And everybody can keep track of who's been doing what and who took a lesson with who and when it was and all that good stuff. So that's the gist of what I'm doing here. Here's the application here. You can see the opening page. And so right now, these top 4 buttons just give you a list of everybody. Here's all the students. And those links all lead to other places as well. But here's all the teachers. And then here are all the resources. So these are the songs and videos and sound clips that you can assign to students. And then here's lessons, which would be a list of all the lessons that everybody's taken. They're labeled here by a combination of teacher, student name, the date of the lesson. There's the teacher alone. You can link to that teacher or the student. How many resources were assigned to this lesson. The last couple of notes that they had, a show button so you can see the drive into that particular lesson, edit or delete. And let's see, finally, yeah, so let's go back again as well. Look at students. We'll open up all the students, and we'll look at this person here, Francis Colucci. And these are all fictitious people. And I have seed data that populates this database. And one of my favorite things to do about this kinds of projects is have seed data, which you can refresh anytime you want. As you're developing, you're going down wormholes and you're hitting bugs and you're deleting and adding things and doing all kinds of stuff. So it's great to have a really solid seed file, which I'll show you here in the Rails application in the code. So this is basically a Rails folder structure here, but it's got a client folder in here where the React application lives. So that's the front end. Otherwise, it is a good old-fashioned Rails folder structure that you would expect. So the seed file. Yeah, here's the seed file. And I took the time to create a nice data set that I understand and see, and as I'm going along developing, I recognize data that should be here, and it helps me figure out, is my application doing what it's supposed to do, because I know what the data is behind it. So I highly recommend it. I'm going to do a blog post on just this subject alone of seed data. We'll also look at a site called Mockaroo, which is a very great site where you can spin up fake seed data of all the flavors you want. So if you need a row of phone numbers and a row of social security numbers and dog names and part numbers or whatever you want to do, Mockaroo is the site where you can create that, and then you just pull down a CSV file and pump it into your seeds file here on this application, and then you can use that data. So it makes things real. It helps keep my head on straight as I'm developing to have a seed file. Along that same line, I have a task that I set up here, a rake task, which simply drops the database, recreates it, migrates it, and runs the migrations, the Rails migrations, which are just the definitions of the tables for the database, and then runs the seed data into it, and then restarts the server. And I put all of that into one rake task. So it's rake db dcms, drop, create, migrate, seed, start. And another quick time saver, great cool thing that highly recommend. I wouldn't do a project without it, and I really can't imagine doing a project without it. So there's that. The whole project is currently arranged in containers now. I'm in the client folder here of the. This is the client folder where the React app lives. So in here I have a containers folder under src source. If I can get it open. Under this containers folder is where all the data lives. And so I have a folder for teachers, students, resources, lessons. I also have a join table called lesson resources. That's just a way for me to quickly assign many resources to many lessons. So every time a particular song is assigned to a lesson, a row goes into this lesson resources table, keeping track of that. That way you can see, oh, this song has been assigned to 15 different lessons, and that's a way to keep track of it. Otherwise, you'd have a lesson that had a screwy looking table behind it if you wanted to keep track of how many resources it had in a lesson. So that's what that is. And then under each of those folders is very RESTful types of naming conventions and thought, so that there's a teachers file, which generally renders the entire teachers index, just like you would in a Rails application. Same with students. There's a students, plural, folder or a file that renders all of the students. Although right now I'm clicking on student, singular. Sorry about that. Then same for resources and for lessons. So then you also have create teacher, edit teacher, and then teacher singular, which would be like a show page for a Rails app. And then in each one of those folders, I've also got a CSS file that matches that particular JavaScript file. So all of the teachers show up here. They take their, if you want to see a list of teachers, it reaches out to this teachers list component, and it is really a glorified table and turned into a React component, and it returns back to you a tabular kind of structure of the data of the teachers that you send in, and it's sort of set up in two parts. As you look at this file, the first part is actually the body of the table, and the bottom part is the part that is returned by this component, and that's where you see the headers of the table: ID, last name, email, show, edit, delete. So those are going to be the columns across the top of the table. So before you get to the return method, you actually spell out what you want all of this data to look like in the middle. And all it is you've sent me a list of, of teachers through props, and for each teacher that you send me, I'm going to create a row in that table, and it's going to have whatever I decide to put into the first name, last name, a button to show that teacher's individual page, because again, we're showing an index of teachers. So things are all broken out that way. Teachers uses teachers list to show you all the teachers. Within the teachers list, you can click on one teacher and see the teacher page. It's also got sections to it, so that the header, teacher header, is basically name, rank, and serial number of the teacher. And then the teacher lessons is, oddly enough, a list of all the lessons that teacher is giving. And then teacher students is all the students that are associated to that teacher. Now the reason that's pretty conveniently possible is because of our API. So once the app is running, it's running on port 3000 over here, you can see. And the Rails app is running on port 3001. And that's because of the way that I did the install. You end up with a proc file here. They call it a proc file. And it starts both of these guys. And it starts the Rails app on port 3001. So that's nice too. Once you build the Rails app, you can go in here and see, is my data really there? And kind of prove to yourself that, yeah, the data is showing up, so that if I can get my act together with the React side, I'll see the data. Or if it's not showing up, then you know that something's wrong on the Rails side. But I opened this for a reason, because when you have this student show page, so to speak, with the 3 sections of student header, lessons, and student resources, that matches the data that shows up in my API. So that because of the way that Rails and Active Record works, if you set it up right, you can go to a particular student. So I'll go to 3001 here, API students, and then pick a number out of the air. So there's number 3. That'll be the 3rd student. And then, so I'm going to collapse some of this stuff, but this API is serving up this particular student. Let's make it bigger. So this particular student, first name, last name, email, their level as a player, as a musician, their teacher is number 3, ID teacher. And then I also have an actual teacher object. And there's their teacher, Erd Tatum. And then these are the lessons that this student has is got in their records here. And even within the lesson has a student object. So I made this API as rich as I possibly could with data all ready to rock before I even built the React app. And then the same with resources. So the point is, I can go to an individual student to find the lessons that student has taken. I can find all of the resources that lesson has had, and all the resources that student has had. I can find the teacher that was related to that lesson. So pretty much any question I want to ask the data is available to me through this API. So while we're on the subject, I'm going to go into that a little bit more here in the Rails side, which is so great about it. It's such a great thing, because you can have a layer on top of your database where you get to ask sort of normal English questions about the data. Like, give me the student and give me all the lessons that student has had. Because that's what a user would say in a business. Give me all the teachers who have used this particular book in their lessons, stuff like that. And it's pretty easy to pull that up and show it in a React app and, make a business logic happen for people. And so here's how it happens here in Rails. So I'll go into the Rails app and into the models. and into, let's say, the student, for example. So this says here, when I create this database model, a student belongs to a teacher, has a teacher ID assigned to them. Although my application right now, any student can take a lesson with any teacher and be assigned any resource. It's not locked down like that yet. Ultimately, I want to have a student every student has one teacher. A student has many lessons and then has many resources through lessons. That's what allows me to say, okay, student number 1 has how many resources, and that's how you find it. But you can go further with it than that too. In Rails, you have serializers. So if you set this up, and you can generate these pretty quickly. Along the top here, these are attributes. These are just the names of the columns in the database for the student. First name, last name, email, level, and teacher ID. Belongs to a teacher. That means that's why that student has a teacher ID. Has many lessons, has many resources through lessons. So what this does, that's what makes my API data so nice and organized on the one we just saw in the browser there, because I'm using these serializers. And whatever kind of massaging you can do to the data on the Rails side can be surfaced through this API, through these serializers. So I have one for every piece of the data. So I have students, I have teachers, I have resources, I have lessons, and then I have lesson resource as well. Because I have a join table between lesson and resources. That way I can assign multiple resources to multiple lessons. So that's why I have a join table there. Another cool tool is the ERD entity. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me open it up it's a PDF file. Basically, what this can do is give you a visual representation of your data model. And I just want to quickly open that up and show you. So, final student. This is a gem that you can install in Rails, which I did. And then it basically makes this nice visual of your data model. And it'll show you what's related to what. The solid lines are there because of direct primary and foreign key relationships between tables. The dotted lines are inferred, or because a lesson has a teacher and a teacher has a student, a lesson has a student. Although, right in this case, actually, a lesson already has a student directly. But right now, let's see. A student doesn't have resources directly. That's a dotted line. But a student has resources because of lessons. And there's all kinds of interrelated, interrelations of that kind of thing in the data. And what I love about that is, after working with Microsoft and SQL Server for 5 years in a consulting group, and we did a lot of projects where people tore their hair out just getting data to show up like this for people. And businesses spent a lot of money just so they could see, how many widgets came down the line at X o'clock in the morning, and what flavor of chocolate was being sold at Friday nights in Toledo. All those kinds of simple business questions you can answer through this active record stuff. So I just love it. So anyway, that's that entity relationship diagram. That's the API. Let's go see if there's other. I'm just going to kind of a couple of prompts here of what we talked about. There's some requirements for this project. This is the end of a long process to go through all the curriculum for the Flatiron Schools online program. Highly recommend it if you got any kind of desire to code. This is a great community to be involved in and learn to code and get help and help other people. Everybody's very nice to each other, and which I really appreciate, because I've been in learning situations where people aren't so nice, and maybe that works in the military. I don't know, but this group of people is a bunch of learners, positive learners, and I just absolutely love it. I bask in it. So if you want to learn to code, there's really no reason not to jump in with us and start learning. So next I'm going to show, quickly show the requirements. Give me a second to open some notes here. So these are the literal requirements for the project, all of which I've met. Code should be written in ES6 as much as possible, so arrow functions, and one of my favorite things to do in JavaScript is to go through and find all the semicolons and remove them and have it still work great. So I love that. And spread operators, so where you take an object and it's got key value pairs and you want to deal with that object, you can use the spread operator to sort of spread it out and add something to it. And so when we're working with state in Redux and React, we do that a lot. Use React, create React app generator to start your project. Kudos to Facebook and all the people that created this create React app thing. It's really awesome. You can spin it up almost as fast as it takes you to pick up your coffee cup, and now you got a React app going. And once you kind of learn some of the idiosyncrasies of this, it really is kind of it's really kind of fun. Almost anything can be a JavaScript component, and any component can be part of another component, and you can pass state from this component to that one, or props, back and forth between components, or you can pass functions into components, and you can send it some data and have it do something with that data when you hit a button. You can show it and hide it, make it dance, make it move, spin around. And once you kind of have that tool set in your mind, it all kind of lights up, and it's just great. That combined with the great data side of Rails and all the work that's been done there, and the education at Flatiron of learning Rails first and Ruby first, really, I can't imagine learning another way. But it's made me think in terms of groups of things and CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete. And even though JavaScript is not as refined as a language as Rails is, with its naming conventions, it makes you think that way, and it makes your development life easier that way. So you really have the best of both worlds. Rails is wonderful for serving up the data in an API, and the JavaScript and the React components and Redux take the best of flexibility of JavaScript and put it on top of that strong foundational data. So really, the world's your oyster. You can build anything you want. Follow the instructions to repo. App should have one HTML page. So this is a one-page app. This app that we're showing here is one single. It's called a SPA, single-page application. If you notice, it never refreshes. All of it happens in this one page. You're never going over here to refresh the page like this and waiting for a page to load. It's one load, and all of this stuff is happening here on the client side. And that's kind of cool. And people at Facebook is the ones that came up with this. There are many JavaScript frameworks out there, and you have yet to learn the other ones. The other two big ones I want to learn is Angular and Vue.js. So I'm going to definitely learn those after this. Another shout out to Udemy and their great course on React. Maximilian Schwarzmuller is the instructor for that course. Great guy, excellent teacher, highly recommended. My gosh, the course is like $12, and it really should be $1,200 because of what he gives you. It should be more than that, actually. It's rare when you find a teacher that can articulate, code, and move you along in your understanding all at the same time, and he does that. And the same with Flatiron, obviously. You got to find the atmosphere where your brain lights up, and you get the concepts. I find that I like to read. I like to watch the videos. I like to code along with videos, and especially like a video that's going along at a pace where I can see what the guy's doing. And then he says something like, okay, next we're going to take this object and we're going to, do this fancy thing to it. Then I'll stop the video right there and say, well, I'm going to do that on my own. And I'll spend the next 20 minutes beating my head against the wall, trying to make it happen to the point where I can, either do it what he said he's going to do or not. And then you hit play, and he does it, and now the answer just comes to life because you just tried to climb the mountain, and now he's saying, hey, look, I'll help you up the mountain. So I love that way of learning, and I like the fact that it's self-paced because I like to go down wormholes. I like to go deeply into a particular topic, and sometimes I just don't think as fast as other people, so I need to be able to stop and absorb everything and then keep moving. This is how I learn, and you learn how you figure out your own learning pace. So anyway, this is a single-page application. It doesn't refresh. It just uses JavaScript and React state to go to these different pages. So let's see. Back to our requirements. There should be 2 containers and 5 stateless components. Well, I got a ton of them. I got a ton of both. At least 8 containers and something like 6 or 8 stateless components. For each one of these data pieces, let me go back down a little bit smaller here. VS Code, great editor. I've tried them all, and I've tried 3 of them anyway. I like this one. So currently, I like this one the best. Client. So if I review just how one data set is here, you'll see how the others are. I'm probably going to rearrange where they sit in these folders, but so in other words, if you see the structure of teachers, just do the math on the others because they're all the same. Teachers, that's a class component with its own local state as well as Redux state. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Essentially, it's sort of like state is like little placeholders for data that isn't hard-coded, and it changes based on where you are in the application, whether you're loading, doing something. There's a life cycle to it. And the great thing about Redux is that it manages that state separately, centrally, in a thing called a store. Kind of like a database, but it's really more like a librarian who's checking stuff in and out of the library. And I guess the library would be the database. Well, in addition to that, what we have local state here, normal React has its own state. So React is a separate animal from Redux. Redux lives its own life and is often used with React. So people often say React/Redux. Well, they're not the same. They're not necessarily married, but they're together quite a bit. So React has its own state. It does the same kind of thing. Temporarily populated data placeholders for what our application needs to do. So here's the teachers component. In the state of it, it has a teacher, show teachers list, create teacher, edit teacher. These are all switches that I put in here. And I temporarily say, okay, when this component loads, show teachers list is false, meaning it's set to false by default. Then I have functions that flip that to true based on what I want it to do. So if we're looking at a list of 31 teachers or 38 different resources and I click on one resource, well, I want the 38 to go away so I can use the screen to see the one. And that's kind of what I'm doing there. And you can pass that functionality all around the different components. And that's essentially what's going on, is we're passing both data bits, data properties to other components, and we're also passing functions. And so I could say to you, here's, what would an analogy be? Here is ham, cheese, and bread, and mustard, attributes. And then here's a function I'm going to pass you called make a sandwich. and I'm passing you're a component, and I'm a parent component. Well, I can then say, here's all that stuff, and here's a button, and whenever I tell you to push that button, that's when you do the make a sandwich function with those props that I gave you, the bread, the mustard, and the meat and cheese, and make a ham sandwich. So that's what's going on, is you're just passing either data and functions around. You're passing around nouns and verbs would be a good way to think of it too. So that's local state versus Redux state. And Redux is the store is a cool thing where there are actions and reducers. Actions are sort of the verbs. Reducers are the final things that the librarian does with with your instructions. So you told the librarian, fetch me all the students, fetch me all the teachers, fetch me all the resources, delete this resource, update this teacher, create me a new lesson. Those are all things like you would ask the librarian to do. Or often in Rails we talk about the restaurant analogy where the cook is making dishes, but the cook doesn't take your order or set the table in front of you like the view. The waiter does that. The waiter's the controller, tells the cook, make me a burger, puts the menu in front of you, the website, the browser, and says, what would you like? And those are the kind of model view controller kind of thoughts. Well, it's kind of the same here. They just don't have it as baked in the terms of model view controller religion as you have in Rails. But it's all there, and it's very cool, and it's a great time to be learning web development because so much great work's been done, so much stress and hair has been pulled out to get us to this point. I can't imagine what the experience would have been like to learn this stuff 17 years ago. Well, it didn't exist 17 years ago. It was being born then. It was evolving then. But now there is so much coalescing around just great tools and organized data and a whole user population in the world that knows how to click on stuff and knows how to look for the about button and people are educated on how to use these things, and so there's just such a short distance between a problem and a solution, at least in the browser, at least as far as data and connecting data and people and time and money and stuff, that there's really no reason why you couldn't build anything you want. There's no reason why you couldn't find a way to at least improve the situation of any problem in the world through web applications like this. I'm focused on data because that's kind of my history, coming from the Microsoft side and coming over here to the... Some people would say you've gone to the dark side. Other people would say you've walked into the light. But it's kind of depends on your perspective. And but coming from just looking at the world through data and CRM applications, I just love the fact that you can do it all in one place in the browser and solve problems this way with your brain. I really, really enjoy that. So that's the quick tour of what a component does. Sorry, I'm taking the long road here through the requirements. What else we have? So we have a bunch of containers and we have components. We have stateless and stateful components all day long in spades here. I have many, many routes, but at the very least I have 3 here. The application has, major routes for students, teachers, resources, lessons, and then routes for each to go to each student, routes to go to each teacher, each resource, each lesson. Oh, here's a fun tour. So here's the resources, and I have a resource viewer component, which is just like a JavaScript component that takes in the resource, and in the database, a resource has a name, a title, a format like PDF or video or whatever it is, and a location, a URL. I'm storing a bunch of this stuff on Cloudinary, which is a great place to store images and files and have it wicked fast available. You get back a URL that you can use to get to that folder file anytime you want. I'm using YouTube for the videos, and I'm using SoundCloud for audio files that I've stored. And so each artifact in the database has a format of vid, odd, audio, or PDF. And so this list we're looking at here is that. So here's also in my column I have this attribute. The view, the JavaScript behind here is looking at the format and saying, okay, you're a PDF. I will show the PDF using the PDF viewer. And it pops open the PDF to see the song here. And then I've got some logic down here that shows teachers who have assigned this particular song. So that's how a PDF shows up, and it's pretty simple. If I have empty, shows that there's no URL. The resource has been created, but it doesn't have an actual artifact yet. So if I click on this one here, is row number 2, all the things. There's my spinner, custom spinner, showing nope, sorry, yeah, you have a placeholder for this tune, but it's not shown up. It's not. You haven't created a PDF for it and put it up on Cloudinary, nothing yet. So that's the cool thing. And this column is just some simple logic behind the scenes that shows up this way. Once there's a valid URL there, this will turn, and the show button will happen. Video opens like this. It's a video player, and here's a cool video. And one of the troubles I've always had as a piano teacher is like, man, I wish this kid would watch this one video I was thinking of Bill Evans talking about the creative process and thinking and laying a foundation of your playing. And boom, there it is. So I can assign that. I could say, okay, that's a nice resource, that Bill Evans Universal Mind. And I was just having a lesson the other day with, one of these students. Here's Peter Grange. He really should get into that thing. So I want to go to his lessons. I think I can go to his particular lesson. Yeah. And right now he's got no lessons, no resources assigned for his lesson. So I can go down and find Bill Evans' Universal Mind, add to lesson, boom. And then magically it shows up. Oh, and while we're at it, you should work on your major scales, boom. Did I hit it? I think it did. Well, you can, anyway, these they'll just all add to the lesson, just like that. And again, the page is not refreshing. This is all magic, React and Redux magic happening here. So then Peter Granger comes, logs on and sees, oh, look at this. I got 4 things that have been assigned to me. So I can click that open and see, oh, this is an audio. Yeah. And so that's what's happening there. So I got a lot of routes, a bunch of routes. There should be a React router and proper Restful routing. Well, that's what we're doing here. The big revelation to me with learning Rails was CRUD and the 7 things that you do with data. 7 things. Index, give me a list of all of them. Show me one of them. Edit one, update, make me a new one, create that new one, delete one. Those are the 7 things that we do with all the data. Those are big, it's like, great, the world's pretty simple in that sense. So and then Restful Routing is sort of using that idea that, okay, here's a row of students, plural, /number, gives me one of the students. And then I could say row of students, index of students, a number, /resources. That student's resources. And then a number. And then I could, on and on it goes. You can relate the data any way you want. Use async actions to send data to and from the server. That's happening over here in React in the the best way to see it here is in the store, these actions. Here's the student actions. You know that librarian thing we were talking about? Essentially what we're saying is, because things cannot happen all at the same time, you cannot go as fast as the computer wants to go if you're dealing with the internet. So if the idea is to go ask the librarian for a particular book, the computer wants to do it all at once, and it wants to execute all of those instructions all at once. But what async allows you to do, asynchronous allows you to do, says basically go ask the librarian for the book, and then wait, and then after the book comes back, then take the book, open it up to page 53, and show it to Mary. But if you write that in code, it all wants to execute at once. So what it does, ask for the book, book's not there, there's nothing to show to Mary, error, everything fails. So async actions allow you to break up those verbs into discrete events that you can plan on dispatching at your intended way. So the word dispatch just means, yeah, we're dispatching an action to do something. And then the word then, here you see then, it's pretty English. It just, like, then do this. Then take the response and do something with it. And what do you do with it? Well, we have these capitalized statements here, which go in our reducer. And that's where Joe the librarian gets the actual instruction, go ahead and file that book away, or make me another book exactly like that, or whatever it is. So that's all that's going on here. Create student, for example. Create student start, create student success, create student fail. Those are all sort of broken down events in what you normally would have done, which would be simply go create student, and it's a one-time thing. Boom, make me a student. By having it broken up this way, we can account for the fact that there may be some time lag between when you asked me to create the student and when I actually got the student information back. Yet I still have to program around it. So that's what asynchronous actions do. And we use what's called middleware, and it's a great name because it's happening kind of in the middle of all of these verbs. So that's where it happens. Actions then are mapped to reducers, which update the state. Another place where you can see that is in the index. This is where you do most of your configuring of it. Index, which index is sort of at the top of the flow of this application, so it all kind of starts there. All these things get loaded. And right now, in 2018, what happens is JavaScript files are all sort of exported and imported into each other to sort of interact with each other. Maybe in the future, we won't have 1,000, or 12 different import statements at the top of a JavaScript file. Maybe we'll have, I don't know, some more, more abstracted way of doing that. Right now, what you have to do is export a particular file, and it sits in a folder, and you kind of import that file from that folder following the path, and you get to that folder, and that way the stuff that's in that other folder is available to you in this folder, or in the file. So anyway, that's why you see a lot of these import statements at the top of a lot of these JavaScript files. And here's where you can see a lot of the, this is where Thunk is, it's the name of the middleware we're using here to do those, separate those actions for the librarian, so to speak. This is where we combine reducers. So to give you another crazy analogy, I don't want to go to this librarian with a huge arm load full of requests all in one bucket. So I've separated them out. I have student reducer, teacher reducer, lesson reducer, resource reducer. And in each one of those reducers, I have all of our favorite 7 CRUD things. show me all of them, show me one of them, show me a new one, edit this one, update that one, delete this one. Those 7 things for each of the 4 groups of data. And what we're doing is combining them into one big fat reducer here in the index file. So root reducer combines all 4 of those, oh well, 5 of those reducers, because I created a reducer for lesson resource as well. That's what, remember a second ago when we were clicking and adding resources to a lesson really quickly, these buttons and the ability to add resources to a lesson like that is because I created this lesson resource reducer. Sorry. So it's a join table again that allows you to do many to many, add many resources to a given lesson. So the root reducer combines them all into one thing, combined reducer. And combined reducers is a Redux magic to do just that. Combine your reducers. And let's see. Apply middleware is how we tell the store, the Redux store, that we'll be using a middleware today with our lunch. And here's how we code it in here so that it wraps it and knows to use it. Then we take that actual store and we set it as a prop it's a good old-fashioned prop. We're passing props to a thing called provider, which is our React Redux provider. My understanding of it is basically that's just how Redux puts its arms around your React application. Literally, it's wrapping around your application. Browser router is React router functionality so that I can create routes, and that's pretty cool. That makes me allowed to do a lot of this kind of Rails types of things that I did when I built Rails applications, where I have students / a number / etc. That's what the browser router does. It works a little funky in my brain to use it at first, because in Rails, all of your routes in a Rails application are sitting here nicely in one place, and you just write whatever you want in here and then use it wherever you want in the application. It's a little different in React router, but ultimately just as cool. Let's give you some examples of that. So in my other folders here, let's show these folders again here. So again, I have in the client folder, client application, in the source folder, under containers, I have all those lessons, resources, students, and teachers. I have HOC, which is higher order component. All that's in there right now is this one called aux, and this one is just a way to wrap stuff without adding any baggage of having HTML divs, in divs and divs and divs. It's sort of an anonymous way to wrap stuff, and it's a little tip I learned off of Udemy, off that German guy. Really great course. There's the store. So UI, user interface. This is where I put components that are just sort of functional. Here's a backdrop. So when you go to add, let's say I'm going to add a lesson, and this modal flies in. This modal and the gray behind it is the backdrop. The gray behind it is the backdrop. The modal is a thing here. These are all just components that are in my user interface folder. The backdrop has properties on it that when I click on it, the modal goes away. And I put some CSS in there so that red means it's going to cancel, green means you're about to create a lesson. And you can go in here and pick a date, and then pull one of the teachers in, pull the list of students, put some notes. Enjoy your practicing. Create the lesson. You can't see it, but the database is spinning around in the background. But again, the database is spinning, but the application is not refreshing. We're still single page apps. So there's the lesson we just created. What else in here? Main nav. Yeah, I was going to go in here just to show you some of the routes. So this is where we have the 4 buttons across the top of the application. And this nav bar up here. That's where this stuff lives. And so an example of routing. So here, link is a React router component, and I'm importing that link component to use it here. And there's a bunch of other ones too. And there's a thing called a route, which is where I've got, for every one of these links here, I've got a route specified at the bottom here. What freaked me, what I don't, it's kind of weird. It's like these routes are just sitting here in this display page, even though they're not really showing up on the page. But I've got them here because that's where I'm putting them. And I've yet to experiment some more with where do these routes need to live. And I think there is some people put them all in one place, similar to a Rails application, which kind of would make more sense to me. Because it kind of feels to me like, well, if I'm putting them here, does that mean they're going to show up in that spot on the page in the HTML? Not really, no. They're just sort of spelled, they're just on the page so that these links up here know what to do with them. But I wonder if I was to take these routes and just copy them out of here. Let's say that. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to comment them out and save the page. And then I'm going to go, I'll go to the index page here, for example, and just, I'm going to put them in here and see if my application still works. Okay, so now I've basically taken those routes out and stuck them in my index page. So they're still within browser router. They're still getting a hug from that. And route is not defined. Let me go to the JavaScript console here. And let's see if we get any other news. Route is not defined in index. Okay, so it's telling me that it doesn't see the route component that I'm asking for here. So if I was up here and I said route, some of those errors are going to go away now. Now it's saying, okay, I get what you mean. You got a route. Okay, but what is a student? What is a teachers? What is the lessons? And what is the resources? Oh, I don't have no idea what that is. So I could come down here and say, all right, well, I'll tell you what that is. Import students from quotes, and now I'm gonna surf a little bit here. src / containers. I just happen to know that this is where this stuff lives. / students / students file, and the quote here. And it already knows that it's a JS file, so that it knows what that is. And then I could say, okay, well, let's do the same thing for teachers. Teachers. And gotta love VS Code. You can do these cool shortcuts. You can quickly do stuff like this. Let's face it, chicks really dig it when you know the command line, right? Resources. Okay, so now I've told my app where those things are. Those arrows ought to go away. So there's going to be one left. Lesson resources. Okay, we'll copy that line, and we'll do that one. So lesson resources. Now that error goes away. Can't resolve lesson resources. Okay. what did I spell it wrong? Lesson resources. Oh, containers / lesson resources / lesson / lesson resources. Save. Refresh. Should have refreshed on its own. Can't resolve. Containers, lessons. Oh, it's puking on all of that stuff. Containers. Okay, so fine. Okay. Students. Yeah. 4 clicks and we'll have this. I think students. Yeah. Teachers. Lessons. Resources. Save it. And now what? Router may only have one child element at any very blah blah blah. Oh, okay. I think it's puking because this is not wrapped in some sort of a div or something. That's what I'll use that aux thing for. Pretty sure that's what's going on. We only have one child element at varying router components will mount. Okay, this may not work. Now, well, a router may only have one child element in component router.component. Oh, okay. I know why. I just went down this rabbit hole in the wrong place. Browser router apparently can wrap this app, but it doesn't want to talk about all these routes right now. So what you'd have to do is take all this over here to app, for example, and do this. Lay them in there and save it. And now then take all these, so I'll take those out. And then let's take all these imports that we just did, copy, and remove them from there. Basically, browser router wants to give a hug to one thing only. And that's that. So now it's going to puke over, okay, here you are in app.js. Where's all this stuff? And just to be careful, we're going to remove that route from there, not use it there. And now we're going to say import in squiggles router, a route from react-router-dom. And then all those guys. Now wait, I don't know if I'm in the right folder structure for that to work. Aux is not defined. Oh, good. It only threw up on that one. Fine. Import aux from src hoc for higher order components aux file aux.js file, and it knows it's JS already. And again, I learned so much of this stuff from this German guy. I got to be careful not to do this silly German accent that he's got. But what a great guy on that Udemy course, Maximilian Schwarzemüller, React Router 16 full course. Great course. A lot of code, a lot of stuff. But wow, you go from zero to having a clue doing that course. Well, Shazam! We now have our routes specified way in a whole different place from where we're using those routes. So I just learned something. That the routes I use in my application, as long as they're in a component under where is it? Yeah. The rest of this application lives under app. That's the Garden of Eden. That's where it all came from that app. And it's wrapped by browser router. So apparently that still works. In my UI, where I have my main nav, and I've commented out those routes here, but these links are still working. So what I wasn't aware of, what I kind of got freaked out about when I learned this was like, okay, you've got a link there and you got a route there, and the route looks like it's part of the display. It's part of the HTML. And this is just the weirdness of JSX, which is a way to mix HTML with JavaScript. And I have learned it fairly recently over the last couple of years, so I don't have a long history of learning JavaScript separate from HTML. So it doesn't matter to me. I think it's awesome the way it works. But some people really don't like the mixing of it. To use it right, it really works, and it's elegant. And you just kind of have to know what's going on with it. And when you work with React, there's this render and return kind of dividing line in a React component. We import stuff, then we're either a class where we have state of our own, local state, or we're a const, a functional component that just takes orders, takes props, and does stuff with the props. We're either one of those two kinds of components in a React app. And then we render back to something. We return back a mixture of HTML with JavaScript logic baked into it. And a lot of times what happens is above the return, you define a thing like you paint a picture of how you want this object to look with divs and HTML elements and and tags and stuff, and say here's what it's going to look like. And then in squirrely brackets within that you've got, and here's my variables that are popped in there. Here's going to be the title and the first and last name and the email address and the title of the book and stuff. And then do that to 50 that I send you. Be ready, And when you're done, wrap all that into an HTML bundle with a variable name, and then in your return, you return it back and just, that example doesn't show so well, but down here, the student resources in the student page where I'm showing a student, that student resources there in squiggle brackets is pointing to all of this JSX that we did up here, which is just JavaScript getting along with HTML. Because what comes out the other end is good old-fashioned HTML. If you look at the web page for this, and let's say we navigate to a student. Look at that responsive thing. See, that's Bootstrap. I used React Strap for this, which is just like, again, I just feel like I'm spoiled. I mean, all I had to do was learn how to work it, man, and look at this application. It just shrinks down nice and pretty, and I got that little hamburger with the, see, that's so cool. React Strap. Anyway, so here's students, and I click on one student, and in that student, you got its header, its lessons, and its resources. Well, that is rendering as sorry. This is HTML that came out the other end of that JSX marriage of HTML and JavaScript. So in other words, it found a way to say, okay, you want to speak HTML and you got JavaScript logic that you want to do. Great. I'll put it all together, and then out the other end is going to come HTML, which the browser understands. That's why you see good old, this is all normal HTML in this that finally makes it to the browser. So what's so cool about this is that all the work's been done to create the languages and the pieces and the parts that talk together nicely. And if you learn how to work them, there's such a short distance between the problem that somebody has, the problem logic of a business, the data of the business, and the solution. You know, this just like, it's like I feel like a kid in a candy store. So awesome, you know, and that people would actually pay you to do this. It's so great. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. So anyway, have I gushed enough? So, in conclusion, thank you for watching my rant or my all of this. Let's see if there's anything else. We've talked about all this. Resource viewer demo, we did all that. Check out Flatiron School. If you want to learn to code and you're willing to work hard, you can do it, and people will help you. And you know, one of my goals this year is to every day help somebody with their coding. And I'm not an expert at all. I just love it, and I've definitely learned how to do. You know, I'm up to body temperature and breathing on this stuff, and really enjoying it. And and I love to teach. I love to teach music. I love to play music, and this feels the same to me. Actually, this feels even a little more creative than a lot of musical situations. This feels more creative in a lot of ways. So the world's your oyster again. Check out Flatiron School and the online learning program, or go to New York and take a boot camp, whatever. I chose the online thing because I could go at my own pace, and I'm in the Boston area, so I can go and hop down to New York once in a while. But I like going at my own pace, and they've been incredibly patient with me and very helpful to me. And the whole spirit of the school is based on like the guy who invented Ruby, Mats. Mats is nice, so we are nice, and people are nice to each other, and it's just a beautiful thing. So you know, if you have any kind of a knack for it, if you can't stop fiddling with web pages and spreadsheets, and you like formulas or you know, puzzles and stuff, I'm not really a math guy. I'm not really an algorithm guy. I'm a musician, but I can conceptualize a lot of these things, and I'm used to thinking on my feet and constantly learning new stuff. And that is one thing you have to do here, is you're constantly learning new things, and you overcome your own inertia and your own weaknesses in a way by accomplishing this. But you'll be a better person for it, and you'll be incredibly satisfied to make things work, and then incredibly frustrated when they don't work, and mystified because it looks like it's supposed to work, and then overjoyed because it works. And it's just all very cool, great, you know, and I can't wait to do more. So thanks for watching. I will put some links in the video where you can see see this code on GitHub. You can see my site, and ping me anytime if you think that there's something I might be able to help you with. It helps me to help other people. And so thanks very much.